Hey everybody, Kimberly here, and welcome to my overview of Redsky, the board game. Yep, settle, conquer, survive. This absolutely has that 4X feel, but way more pared down and focused on some of my favorite elements in this style of game, which is building up your civilization. You are going to be moving out on this grid board that you will piece together with your tiles. Therefore, every game will be different because your maps are going to look different with different resources available to players in a variety of places. You're also going to work on expanding to gain those resources on the map by placing out villages and cities and using your armies to do that. You're also going to be investing in vice and virtue cards and going through that time era. Essentially, you are going to be moving through historic era into the classical era. Exodus era, and then Redsky era. So here's what I want to do in this overview. I want to talk about those features that I really enjoy that I think are pretty unique to a Civ kind of game. So the very first thing I want to talk about is that players are going to essentially have one of those factions. Now that's not wholly unique to these kinds of Civ games. You have a civilization that has a specialty or has a focus. But I am going to say that this is pretty unique in the sense that there are 6 of these characters to pick from in the base game. They're going to come with a character card that tells you what you start with and tells you what your alignment is. So my spore spawn here are industrious, and they definitely are more earth focused. They are ground or terrain focused. I start with a corn, I have 2 ore and 1 wood, and then I have these 2 special abilities. One says once per round, and the other one is just an existing bonus that I just continue to receive. My cities have +1 village limit and can gain double resources from hexes with 2 cubes. That's essentially not as part of the rules. It kind of breaks the rules a little bit. And you'll see that all these characters do give you something really special that kind of like bends the rules for everyone else. So I not only have this spore spawn, you'll see here there's Knight Rider with their specialty, Feather Folk with theirs, Archivists, Wake Walkers, and Humans. It's going to also provide me with this guide sheet. Now what's really cool about this is it walks you through the 4 actions that would benefit the spore spawn and the player playing the spore spawn, which is the first round of the game. The actions suggested here include players remain competitive with more experienced players. It also gives new players a chance to learn how the game's various actions work. So read the guide aloud when it's your turn, and players will simply do setup, action 1, action 2, action 3, and action 4. And then there's even this suggestion for further actions and further rounds, and so suggestions for gameplay. I think this player sheet is fantastic, and you'll see that there are sheets for everybody in the game, and it's just a nice guide because sometimes these games can be so big and so overwhelming, and a lot of games don't offer those specific suggestions. So you've got the Knight Riders here. Again, you've got these sheets that help you start with. There's like I know what you start with, I know what your special ability is, and then here are the things that I would suggest you do, which is different from, let's say, my spore spawn. So I think this is just a fantastic feature of the game that maybe more of these bigger games or these Civ games should offer players. And I think it's just fantastic. I played with these the first time that I played and the first time I introduced it to other players, and we all found them incredibly helpful. I also like trying out all the different factions and seeing how they play and what kinds of benefits and resources they get, and really how you should play them. Now there are 6 characters because if you look out here at the elements board, this is a major feature in the game: water, fire, earth, air, ether, and void. So my card spore spawn said move 2 in earth. That's going to be my start bonus, but notice that you have 1 cube of your color, your faction. All I have here is just the green because that's the player I'm showing right now, but everybody's cube is going to be out here starting with one particular focus. In this case, the Feather Folk is going to obviously be 2 spaces towards air. That makes sense. So you're going to have your cube out here. Now what that means is you are now allowed to go over here as one of your actions is to essentially claim one of these vice or virtue cards based on where your marker is. So it goes from 0, which is in between earth and air, which are the two opposites, and it goes all the way to 4. And so you'll notice that the vice cards are going to be very helpful but also negative at the end of the game, and virtue cards are really helpful, but they're positive points. So the player who has the most virtue cards at the end of the game will win the game. That's essentially, this is the heart of the game right here. You're doing everything else to manage and to work this elements board. So there are only 2 cards of each type. So you have only 2 level 1 vice cards, and this one's called rigid. And you'll notice the vice is down at the bottom. There's going to be this text up here, but then you'll see here level 2, this is at the top and it says virtue, and this one's called systematic. Now vice cards are free, but virtue cards cost an investment because they are technically victory points when you have them. So they're going to have a cost in addition to what you actually get down here. All the cards are going to give you these bonuses. So you've got 2 of the vice ones, 2 of the virtue, level 2, 2 of those 3, the vice pedantic, and then lastly, virtue level 4 is educated. So every single one of these elements has this stack of cards that are face up and available to every player in the game, but when there are just 2 of each, you essentially are going to want to race. Now, if you look at the card, let's go to the opposite side on air. This is one of the coolest things. This is the coolest feature of the game, which is why I'm probably spending a lot of time on it. It's my favorite aspect. And this is something I haven't necessarily seen in a Civ game, unlike the unique characters and the asymmetrical start, which I really like here, but this is more traditional, more expected. So here, this one says arbitrary, and it says swap with systematic. What you're going to see on these vice cards is that you can swap them if you swing to the other side of the pendulum of this dual-sided element track, and you can swap your negative card with, here's systematic, a virtue card. So the whole strategy in this game is to maybe rack up a bunch of those vice cards because they're free, they give you really cool stuff, and then swing back down the track and essentially knock out the vices from the other side, gaining the virtue cards towards the end of the game. And that's really what players are going for. That's what they are trying to do. Every single one of these vice and virtues, 1, 2, 3, 4, for each of the elements is unique and interesting. They're so cool, and you spend most of the game kind of searching through the decks and hunting for what you're looking for and really working on your progress here in these tracks. Again, this is how you win the game, is by staying in the game, by not getting knocked out with losing your last city on the world map that you build. And then if you do stay in the game, which when I played, all my players were able to stay in the game, nobody was eliminated. At the end of 8 rounds, you count up your virtue cards. Now this is where the rounds are actually counted. So there's the heroic era, and what players do is they just shuffle and then put 2 into the pile from each of these. So I'm just going to grab 2 of these randomly, and then I'm going to put the others over here. And so what we have is 8 rounds. So you have 2 from each, and you'll stack the cards here, and then you'll just start the round by flipping over a card. So you flip over the heroic era and you put it here in the active. And these heroic ones are really good. They're nice at the beginning. They give players, looks like here, a free army strength of 1, and then they get to move the army. This is, again, a way to spread out, to expand your civilization, to gain more resource hexes, and then place down those villages and those cities. But here it says players at 0 on the Void Ether spectrum may spend a gold or a culture to gain +1 on Void or +1 on Ether. And then it says here, you have more text about at the end of the round, do this. So we'll keep this card here, and then it will slowly go here until we discard it. And this is a way for us to keep track of cards that are in play, and then cards that are finished, and we also know exactly where we are. So every single round is going to begin with one of these cards. And again, the cards start off as kind and generous and benevolent for players to kind of get their engine going. And then when you get towards the end, let's take a look at possible Redsky era card. It's all cracked and broken, and this is called the Apocalyptic Swarm. Each player chooses one of the cities they control. If the imminent swarm was drawn in the Exodus era, those cities are attacked. And so we look back at the cards and say, oh, during the Exodus era, did we have the imminent swarm? They'll do this. If it was not drawn, the cities are attacked by a swarm strength of 3. So your cards are going to influence your further cards. Cities captured by swarms are destroyed. And then here we're going to gain rocks. This is for each battle defending player wins. That player gains one of these rocks. So these cards are going to affect play, give players an opportunity to do things, and really kind of give the flavor in between each of the 8 rounds to kind of guide or inform players' rounds. So let's just say settle, survive, the element track, the eras over here, the unique characters. That all sounds really good to you, but you're not so sure about the conquer. There is a peaceful mode or variant in this game that prevents players from attacking each other, which is built into the core of this game. Battle is a part of this game, and taking other players' village, clearing their villages, but also taking their cities. But the peaceful mode prevents that, and it includes more heroic eras and fewer of the later eras that are more destructive. So if you want to do that, great. There's a fantastic peaceful mode. There's also shorter games that you can play that don't have 8 full rounds. But if you're playing one of your 8 rounds, the first one with these player aid cards, you're learning the game as you play, and then you get 7 more rounds to essentially dictate what you want to do on your turn, which I find really cool. So what you're doing in the game, raising armies, moving your armies, settling in those tiles and the resources. You might be developing by placing those village cubes out. You can trade resources, grow your culture, because culture is how you pay for your element movement. And align means gain an element of your choice, a card, and then that's acquire. So align is gain movement in your element, and then acquires gaining that vice or virtue card. So these are those resources over here. I've got culture, I've got the rock, I've got the food. You have to feed your armies if they're not within cities that are your limit. You also have the wood, and then the gold is right here. And again, you're just going to see that on these. Once you put your grids together, you're going to see that there are these tiles in these locations that have these resources that you are going to be getting at the very beginning of every round. So just a really a lot of interesting features to this game that I wouldn't necessarily expect with the Civ game, but there are some that are pretty standard or pretty traditional that absolutely remind me of some of those great Civ games, like the character cards and the battle. The battle is reminiscent of Risk, the rolls where you have a max amount of dice that you're rolling, and you essentially are doing your high to their high, your next highest to their next highest die, and so forth. Just a lot of lovely features. So check out Redsky, see if it's right for you, and if all of the cool things that I talked about line up with your idea of a fantastic game night. All right, I will see you later.